I'm Diane Wilkin, and I'm in my 60s now, looking back at the 60s. Here's a painting I found. This is my house at Ithaca Court in Trenton, New Jersey, Trenton 90, New Jersey, before zip codes, and I must have been in first grade. I'm going to take you through some of this documentation. I did a book called Echoes of My Life, and a lot of the stories from the 60s are in it. So I'll start there. My sister and I would spend summers at my aunt's house in Virginia, and that was where I learned that there were colored only and whites only water fountains. Interesting experience learning about that as a kid at the local gas station. There are other stories in here because my mother had passed away when I was 2 and my dad remarried. And I remember driving out to Nebraska in a, with the top down, and we had a great time in a convertible, and they had these incredible purple shoes that they had at the reception made out of sugar. My favorite. Lots of stories in this book. This is a picture of my cousins because all my cousins live in Virginia. It was their house we stayed at, and they came up to visit us just before we moved into a new house, just when my brother was born. So this is my brother here with my grandfather. My grandfather came and helped my dad out before he got married and took care of my sister and I. He was a big part of our life. So what else did I find in the 1960s? I found this report card from 1963 to 64, my 3rd grade year. And first time I saw a teacher cry in class. I didn't know what was happening, and then the principal announced that our president had been shot. President Kennedy. And so I know exactly where I was when that news came through. That was also the year of the Beatles' I Want to Hold Your Hand. And I can tell you we were all singing that on the way home from school. Whew. That was a tough year, I remember that. About that time, I also got my certificate of membership into the Girl Scouts. So I moved into some community work, trying to join some friends outside of just my school network. And in January 19th, 1964, I received the oral polio vaccine. I don't know about you, but that was a big deal too. I can remember getting sugar cubes and standing at the firehouse probably for a good hour as we all waited to get in for polio vaccines. Somewhere in those early 60s, this is my older sister and me. It snowed so much, you talk about climate change and things happening now, that the snow covered the car, and we actually took our little saucer up on the back of the car and saucered off the car. The things you remember are incredible. I have a grandmother in Canada who sent this to me. I must have been 10, 11, 12. And this is what they had an article about school books and guns in school books. And yeah, we're still talking about school books in elementary schools. So we moved to a new house. This is my first report card from the new school. This is Corey Hill, Mrs. Hollister, from 1965 to 66. And I had a really good friend, Shirley, down the street. And that's a portrait I found I did of Shirley. Probably, maybe it was her first portrait. But what I remember about Shirley is doing a sleepover at her house, and she had older sisters. And the conversation that night was how they weren't going to tell her older sisters the news about, it was either a boyfriend or a really good friend who had been killed in Vietnam, until after exams. I remember that. But Mrs. Hollister, again, another teacher who cried in class. And that was tough too. We didn't know why. She'd been out for a while, came back in, and her son had committed suicide and shot himself in her basement. We learned a lot, and we had a lot of conversations in 5th grade that year. This is my 6th grade teacher. She's the only teacher I have a personal picture of, but she sent me a postcard during the summer and talked to me about a trip that she took to Germany. She is the first teacher who hung a piece of my artwork on the wall, and I won an award. So 6th grade goes back to that. We took a trip to California, and my dad was in a class there. We stayed in a hotel apartment for about 2 months. My grandmother sent me this, and it's just kind of neat to have that time period thing. I don't know what that stamp's gonna be worth. But she talks about Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, not exactly her movie. She talks about some of our family and relatives and puts a little bit of understanding into who's who in my family line, and just kind of cool typing on an old typewriter. And it's her typewriter that I learned to type on. So that's kind of cool. These are some pictures of our trip out in California that I found. And I love this picture of my mother with her glasses on, because that's like the epitome of what I think of styles in the 60s. So in August of '69, I get a letter from my other good friend. And it's just interesting because we're talking about what's going on in the 60s, and we're talking about books and war and all the different things that happen. So here's this letter from a 14-year-old telling me what books to read, what she's been doing, who she saw at what she ate, who she saw at the pool. And then it goes on and it says, you know, with all this Kennedy business, I'm getting so I really don't care what Kennedy was doing on that wrong road. He just showed me he was not capable of handling that emergency. So he's certainly not capable of handling the presidency. This was Ted Kennedy and Chappaquiddick. That event was happening. And she goes on again to talk about other friends and people. And well, she says, our astronauts are out of quarantine. I bet they have spent more pleasurable days. Now come all the celebrations. And she's anxious to see all the parades for our astronauts who were on the moon. And she says, we've got a new AM/FM radio the other day. We've never had one before. We got a new one now. I can't wait to listen to WCAU. Simon and Garfunkel, her poster is falling, so she's got to fix that. And she ends it with peace signs. So there you have it. Kind of a showcase of my experience during the 1960s. And I'm in my 60s, and I'm going to create the back of this picture, as a time capsule with my memorabilia. And let's open it in another 60 years. And there you have it, my time capsule.